Hello, hello.
How's it going, Matt?
Erin. You there, Erin? Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Dr. Erin Baker, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we get too deep into this, I gotta nerd out here for 3 seconds. Tom has now slathered our Irreverent Health logo and some attractive labeling to the bottom of our video feed, and I'm not hating this. This is pretty fun.
You know what? Listen, when
Yeah.
they said, "Hey, it's only $10 more a month," I said, "I think I can spend that.
I could swing that." Yeah. So, Dr. Erin Baker,
Yeah.
you are our first labeled on the bottom with your name all fancy like in the bottom.
Wow, I feel so honored.
Yeah, you are our first. Oh man, this is a fun platform, and they're just always releasing new stuff, so we kind of discover as we go, so to speak. So.
Yeah, makes sense.
So cool, man. Welcome. And I can't wait to dive in, but just to kind of get it right into it, like you got a really cool thing, this whole chasing joy, and we're going to just totally dive in here. But how the hell did you get there? Like, can you get us up to speed on how we got here?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked me that, because the assumption that people often make when they see that I wrote a book all on joy is that I must have just been a naturally joyful person all the time. And maybe I am, to that degree, a fairly joyful person, but I wasn't aware of that.
Sure.
Joy wasn't in my vocabulary until a couple years ago. To me, it had some religious connotations. And then I had a friend who wanted to create this world joy movement, and he had this big smile on his face all the time. And I went, yeah, that's for you. But not for me. And then at one point I started feeling like I really have a book in me. I don't know what it is. And I went through so many iterations, and I finally had a conversation with my then wife, and I said, what are the people in your world, and they're entrepreneurs at this point, struggling with? And she said something about they don't want to hate themselves and their business. And my brain went, oh, they're looking for joy.
Simple as that.
It was as simple as that. And then I kind of sat with that word because it wasn't in my vocabulary. And I went, oh my gosh, this is the thing I have been seeking and cultivating for years without realizing it. And I'd started a business for it. I had left the corporate 9-to-5 for it. And then I started looking at, oh my gosh, every time I follow what I now define as joy, that's when things really take off for me. And it's when I let joy drain from me is when things get hard and I don't do as well. I don't have as many successes. I don't feel good. And so I have now almost I went from having joy not as in my vocabulary to now being totally fascinated and continuously learning about what is this word?
Sure.
And what is this emotion? And what can it do for you? And then very concretely, it's not just we feel it, great, but like, what is it very concretely, and how can we do more of it as human beings?
If you had no sort of lexicon for this prior, what made you zero in on that word? Like what kind of said, hey, this feels like joy?
I don't know. It just was a download.
Yeah, just that's it. Okay.
It was just a download. And then I started looking at what is this word that just came to me, and realizing, oh, this is so different from happiness. And happiness is something that so many people are chasing. And it is something that we all feel like we have a lexicon around. It's like, oh, I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when I hit that milestone, when I get married, when I get that new car, right? And we're sold happiness in products. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, there's this thing that I didn't even have in my vocabulary. I don't know how it came to me, but is so important. And so now it's become my broader mission to help people connect to this concept that so many of us don't even really have a full understanding of.
Sure. And I've never heard anybody differentiate between joy and happiness, but I will say
it does kind of make sense though. Yeah.
It does make sense now that you're saying it. And funny enough, several years ago, my wife took an online course from Harvard on joy and income in particular. And it was super fascinating because they found that below, and don't quote me on this, but it wasn't a huge number. It was like $75,000
It
or
is
something.
now 140,000.
It's now
It's gone up.
Yeah,
Yep.
but it was basically like everything under this that could be true, but anything above this, which is like a huge amount of options, was like no, it doesn't really change.
No happier in your life.
No statistically happier. And I was like, wow, that's crazy, because at the time I was making more than that, and I'm like, well then, what the fuck's wrong with me?
Why am I miserable?
I'm making well over that, and yet I don't really feel like I am like normal, right? Like I feel,
Yeah. Well, the happiness thing is, for me, the way I've defined it, and there's some scientific background to this. It's the result of an external circumstance. You've gotten that job, right? You bought the car. You've made that certain amount of money. Whereas joy is, if you think about, just go back and think about the last time you felt joyful. For me, I think about, I'm playing with my dog. Or, yes, there's an external circumstance, but it's not necessarily an accomplishment of some sort, right?
Sure.
Joy can just be felt in even being in your authentic self. And so if I had to make a really crude distinction, it's like happiness is that thing we're chasing in the outcome. And joy is the thing we can feel along the way and in any moment. And a lot of people are trading joy in seeking happiness.
That's crazy. And that's totally right. And again, it's even funnier. And now that we're thinking about this, now I'm all like, we got to like sit down and do some peyote or something. Cause now,
cheers.
Now I'm like, oh fuck, you know what? I find a lot of joy in, I love, and I mean, love astrophotography, right? I fucking,
he's pretty good at it too. He's shared some photos with me.
I fucking love it. It is awesome. But here's the thing, is the most infuriating, fucking maddening, hair pulling, borderline psychosis inducing fucking hobby that's ever been created ever. Like
it might rival golf. It might rival golf. And I find joy in being in the total misery of golf.
But and I find absolute joy really ready to smash a very expensive tool to dust on the ground when I, for the 18th time, could not get it to work. I'm like, and yet
so far my favorite thing about this conversation is this does not feel like toxic positivity at all. Right? There's none of that here.
Actually, I make a distinction about that in my book. And the reason I spelled joyful, joy-full, rather than the normal joyful, is because when I first started talking about joy, people started to assume that I was going down that route of all sunshine and rainbows and bury everything else. And I feel like one of the beautiful things about joy is we can feel it in, times when we're facing challenge or in grief or in sorrow. So there's joy in the full range of the human experience. And that to me makes it so cool to think about, is how can we find joy in all the things that we don't normally think about being joyful.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think until you sit down, don't you find this with so many topics in life where you're like, we're so trained to just say, hey, I wake up, I brush my teeth, I do this, I do that. You have your routine, and then you go to work, and then that's a thing. And then you come home, and if you have a significant other, then that's a thing. And then if you have kids, that's a different thing. And then you go to sleep, and that's a thing. And then you wake up and you just rinse and repeat, right? Like, and so many people are just not paying attention. And that's not always a bad thing, but I find that like the nuance of things, like the difference between joy and happiness, like that easily falls through the cracks, because in order to actually dissect that, you either need to have a glass of wine and a healthy amount of time set aside to have a conversation with somebody like yourself, or you have to fucking pay attention. And again, another recursive theme we see on this show is that if you're not always paying attention, then you miss most of the things. Like, life is a nuanced activity, and like, inspiration and observation comes literally second by second.
That leads to like a question I have now, because the way we're wording everything, the way we're talking about joy right now, it sounds like there's a big overlap between joy and being present.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah. Very much an overlap between joy and presence. Also an overlap with a few other things, including connection. So we're here connecting with each other, but connecting to ourselves, or connecting to photography is about the big world out there, right? Spirit.
I connect to everything when I'm taking astrophotography. If you don't think I'm not thinking about, like, I am a molecule in a
right. Yeah.
That's it. It's like,
yeah. And it's there's a joy piece that's about curiosity, and if you're too worried about the outcome, you can't be curious, right? It's about being in a creative space, which creativity requires presence, and then courage, right, to fuck it up and have challenges. So there's a high overlap with some really cool things that we don't always pay attention to. And I think this is interesting. You're talking about it's about attention. It's also about intention. So it's not just about looking for the joyful moments. It's how do we create them? So how do we create those things like moments of connection? How do we be more curious in our day-to-day life? How do we make sure we're in a creative space? How do we look at the things that scare us and engage in those tiny acts of courage that build up to, holy fuck, I did that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where it gets a little challenging, because I think one of the things that I get when I talk to people outside of people that would be on this show, let's just say, let's summarize that right.
The normies.
If you know a person, I keep wanting to say muggle, but like that's just a terrible.
It kind of is the muggles, right?
Yeah, right. But if I'm just like just a rando, muggle, let's use that because it's easy, running around, it's really hard to even know how to pay attention at that level to anything at all. It doesn't matter what the topic is, but I would say if you had to put these in a order of importance, joy would probably be in the top 3, right? Because most humans, I can't imagine have a radar for that, or a sensitivity, or even a knowledge that a sensitivity of that could even exist so that they would go looking for it.
Yeah, no, they don't. But it's something people all universally want, even if they don't have the vocabulary for it.
Sure.
And they don't know how to go looking for it. Or one of the things I encountered when I was doing my research for my book is that there's associations with joy that are not positive. So I had a friend who one of my taglines is chase joy and success will chase you. And that comes from this conversation where she was talking about, I think Gary Vaynerchuk says chase excellence and success will chase you. And I was having this conversation with her one night and I said, well, what happens if you put joy instead of excellence? And I saw her go, oh yeah. And then I saw her whole body freeze. And I said, okay, what's happening? And she said, immediately, she's a high achiever, works at one of the big 4 accounting agencies, has a podcast, is a podcast coach, plays for the Canadian national cricket team at the time.
Wow.
Like really highly, ambitious person.
So
and
an underachiever for sure.
An underachiever completely. And her first reaction is, oh, if I chase my joy, I will be on my couch, eating McDonald's, binging Netflix.
I mean,
but that sounds more like you're looking for a dopamine hit.
Well, but that was her association with joy.
Yeah,
and I said, what that tells me is right now your joy is in rest.
Yeah.
Actually, right? And so we just started to unpack it and started realizing there's all these associations around, especially when it comes to professional joy, right? Is if I'm chasing my joy, I'm being selfish, I'm being irresponsible. If I do the things that really light me up and make me come alive, like astrophotography, my financial success is going to tank. Right. And so,
my financial success was put in direct peril by adopting that very expensive hobby.
I mean, it could, but what that association does is make people think, oh, the only way to be successful is to do the things that feel hard, that aren't fun, that are miserable. And so it's either it's joy is not on the radar or joy has consequences. Right. And I lean towards the joy wasn't on my radar, and then realized part of the reason it wasn't on my radar is because I believed it had consequences. Following my joy.
What was that from? I heard you say, what was there? Was there like an acute life event or just a chronic,
I think
exposure?
the message is my parents. And I think I don't have any specific messages from my mom that I can think of, but my dad was teaching me from a very young age about work ethic and responsibility, and that it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
And,
We've never heard that before.
Was your dad a boomer?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And so,
Yeah.
the boomer generation has a specific mentality. And so that was ingrained in me in a young age. And
sure.
And the times I did things like following my joy, and just joy at that point of my childhood was being a child playing, right? I was given consequences for the choices I made that were irresponsible. And so what often happens to us is the things that we learn as children get frozen in time. And so
sure.
I'm running around like a 5-year-old scared of my dad yelling at me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you're also an Xer, so that feeling guilty for having fun, that's like just kind of built in.
I'm not quite an Xer. I'm a geriatric millennial, but I feel like
all right. So we're technically Zennials, so we're just on the other side of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we're hovering
we
around
sympathize with you,
line.
but we'll still make a joke about doing your mom.
Yeah.
Like that is where we are.
I work with some like squarely millennial clients in my business, and I'm like, I don't understand you, but the Gen Xers, like, that makes sense to me. Like, I was telling my partner the other day that I grew up with, my parents are professors, and they just let me loose on the university campus. No cell phones, no way to contact them. And for like 4 or 5 hours, I'd be wandering the campus, and they just assume I'd come back.
Yeah. That's funny. Oh, but you poor thing. 2 academic parents. Jesus Christ.
I know.
Oh God. Yeah. The super achievers. They were probably both tenured.
Not only that, but my mom is the most published woman in her field in the 20th century.
Oh
so.
my God.
Oh man.
Yeah, and she's an expert in lie detection.
I want to ask so bad, but I don't want to force it out of you.
She's an expert in lie detection. So,
oh my
God!
So,
that's awesome.
Oh no,
that was good for me as a kid.
You couldn't fuck around at all.
Nope.
Are these your cigarettes? I'm just gonna say yes, even if they're not, because it doesn't fucking matter.
It's mine. They're mine. Yes, sir.
I'm just gonna save you some time. I'm just gonna hold a flashcard up that says yes.
Yes.
That's hilarious. No fucking way. God, that must have been torture. Jesus Christ.
It was a lot, but that's part of the reason. I had 2 very high achieving academic parents who work 7 days a week, and the message was success requires sacrifice.
And what was your dad? An expert in body language, so you can't even fucking hide by standing there still?
Well, kind of, yeah.
Oh, for God's sakes.
They were both professors of communication, so yes.
Oh man.
Oh,
Jesus Christ. You are.
Not only that, you got a lecture.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it was all ingrained in me.
God.
So it's amazing that I found my joy at all, but it's something that I continually have to work through. Is these messages that I got, they are ingrained in me in such an automatic way that I have to catch myself when I go, oh right, this isn't my belief. This is what I was told. And so, that's why joy is hard for so many people, is that, especially the clients I work with who are, Generation X or millennials, is like we've gotten the boomer message. Gen Z's got a little different attitude, and I kind of am in all of them.
Yeah, and actually, for as much as I make fun of some of the what are the 20-year-olds now? Like, what is that?
They're Gen Z.
They're
Gen Z. Yeah.
So as much as I can make fun of them, there's a couple things that they are getting righter, and I think if you look at it at a macro level, and I'd love to know if your research from the book supported this, but I would suspect at a macro level, you see from generations of extreme strife, greatest generation spawn boomers, which had it just a little bit better. And so
they had it significantly better, and then they fucking shut the door. Sorry.
But then they gave birth to Xers, and they didn't have like a lot of the same, on Maslow's hierarchy, we're moving up the triangle here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so I think by the time you get to Z, like, it's like, okay, well, look, yeah, the world's not a perfect place, but like by and large, you could Uber or anything could be brought from your phone to your hands within an hour. Doesn't fucking matter what it is.
Yeah.
Your life isn't that difficult. So you have different problems. And sometimes those problems are like, hey, I got to get out of work right now to go do something for me. And they don't feel ashamed or embarrassed or upset or guilty about that. And I could make fun of it because I'm an Xer who's like, fuck you, go to work until you're done and then do it. But then when I look at it rationally and no one's paying attention and I don't have to admit it to anybody, I'm like, they didn't really need to do that right this second. I mean, I don't know why we're
absolutely not. Yeah.
I don't know why we're so fucking hell bent on this. It's kind of a stupid thing to be hung up on, but
yeah. I mean, I read a debate today on Instagram. There was a post about Gen X and millennials millennials and Gen Z rejecting hustle culture. And there was a big debate about whether that was a good thing or not. And several people were like, no, your 20s are for your hustle and grind. And then you can take your time.
Yeah. Then you could write a book on
then once you have arthritis, you can take that world trip that you always meant to do. Right. And not be able to walk up the damn mountain.
Yeah.
Well, and so, what I think is really important is that so often these debates are about career versus work-life balance, right? And like, so for a lot of Gen Zers, it's, my career is not the most important thing in my life. And what I want to come back to is, cool, I think that's a great idea. Also, if you're going to be there many, many hours of your waking life, how can it be more joyful?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and also it's tough too. And I think that this is where sort of the message gets mixed up pretty easily, is that I hear all that, but like as we rebound back to even a center line from that juxtaposition between an X and a Z that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Career doesn't have to be the most important thing, but I can't then in the same breath complain about how long it's going to take to pay off your student loans, or I can't afford to buy a house because they've never been more expensive. There's all these sort of built-in sort of, I guess, buttresses for why you don't have to work and hustle in your 20s. Cause I agree with you, man. Like if you're going to hustle, if you are the hustle type, your 20s is where you want to get it out of the way. Right. Like if you're not the hustle type, right. Yeah. If you're not the hustle type, then okay, no big deal.
Right.
But like you pick a lane, you know what I mean? Like
that's why cool. I want people to not pick a lane. I want people to make a shit ton of money by following their joy and not hustling and grinding.
Sure.
That's if at the core of my argument of everything around joy is not just about the sunshine and rainbows, but like find the things that make you come alive. Find the things that align to your strengths, right? Find the things that make you want to show up every day and do it your way. And
so why do you think we do that now? Like what's stopping us? Like what got us built into this route?
Well, so there's a couple of things I think that are contributing to it. I think one of the things is that we get rewarded at an early age for doing things we're really great at, even if we don't love them. There's a great book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap, and he talks about the zone of excellence versus the zone of genius. And the zone of excellence is the stuff we've been rewarded for, where it may not come to us naturally, but we're good enough at it that we keep doing it. Our zone of genius, which I really think is aligned with our joy, is the stuff that comes so easy we discount it. We think everybody must do this well. And it's uncomfortable because we have been taught it's in sort of a societal way that things that are hard are valuable. Things that are easy aren't. But the things that are our genius, our joy, they come easy. And so what happens is it's uncomfortable to be in our joy. And so we go right back to that zone of excellence.
Right. And so that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess when you started to come out of it yourself, and I suspect that sort of influences the curriculum or thought path you take your clients on, what's the ladder I climb to get out of this? Like how do we start things rolling, and then what does that journey kind of look like?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a mountain metaphor here.
Okay.
I'm going climbing. Well, I'm not climbing. I'm going to be up on Mount Whitney next week. So this is in my brain.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that on the last call. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of people expect all change to be about volcanic change. we're going to explode everything. Lava eruption, right? And that can be really scary for people when I say, you know what, you're not following your joy, and that's what's keeping you from your business success, your professional success. The thing about lava changes is they don't actually stick, right? So a volcano can't grow very tall. Most volcanoes on this earth, you think about like the Hawaii volcanoes, they're not that tall, right? Kind of hit a ceiling. I really think that it's more like these tiny changes. So most mountains are tectonic plates rubbed together and centimeters of earth change, right? It's like these little tiny earthquakes. And over millions of years, you get a mountain like Everest, and Everest grows tall. And so what I tell people is that when we're realigning towards joy, our goal is Everest, not Mauna Kea. And so it's also way less scary to think about, we're going to take a very micro approach to realigning towards joy. So what I have people do is I have them start even just taking an audit of everything they're doing in professional life, personal life, all the people they're around, all the projects they're doing, all the activities they're doing, and see, I have them draw a line down a piece of paper. And on the right side, it's all the stuff that's draining their joy. And then on the left side, it's all the stuff that's bringing them joy. And then we literally one by one go down and say, okay, this thing that's draining your joy, do you still need to do it? If so, how do we make it more joyful? Let's try that.
So let me ask, when people do that exercise for the first time, like, and they see that, like, you get to the end, right? You've peeled the onion, all the list is done. How many people look at that list like, holy shit, I didn't ever know this? Like,
everybody. I still do it. I still do it for myself. I'm not immune to it. I do an audit on my own self on a regular basis, and I'm like, holy shit, because the joy leaks are small. Oh,
interesting. Yeah,
they can be very, very small, and so it's about these small changes. And I'm a researcher by background, and so I think about, okay, well, now let's design an experiment, right? So if I go change this one thing.
Damn your parents.
Right? Damn my parents. But it's actually a really good approach, because instead of changing everything, right, we're changing a micro thing. So great example is, I can't tell you how many people I talk to in business who hate things like cold pitching or LinkedIn. And, I sit there and I say, okay, do you have to do, that's draining your joy. Do you have to do that? And most of the time they say yes. And I say, why? And then when we dig into the why, it's actually not true. They don't actually have to do it. Or if we come to they actually do have to do it, we go, great, then how do we make that more joyful? And then the next thing comes up, right? The next thing comes up. The next thing comes up.
Sure.
And if you do it in that slow way, what happens is that doesn't threaten people into this, oh my God, everything's going to come crashing down, because still 99% of your day, you're still doing the other things that keep the lights on. And so the idea is that over time, we slowly peel away these things and experiment and find out, what happens if I try this more joyfully? Does my business or my professional life or does my personal life crumble? No? Okay. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And so I tell people, if you're going to work with me on your joy, it's going to take a while, because we're going to do it in a way that feels safe.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're giving up a lot of fear in that, right? You're gonna be pressing on that fear button because it's new, it's different.
Yes.
And this isn't what I was told.
Right. That's a huge piece, is that we are told that there's a certain way we're supposed to show up in the world. And so what I want people to do is be experimenting in a way that's uncomfortable, but not unsafe. And so unsafe could be unsafe. My nervous system is in anxiety, or it could be unsafe. Like, if I do that, I could lose 100K in revenue tomorrow. Right.
Sure.
So we figure out what are those levers to just push and pull at over time. And again, coming back to the mountain metaphor, it may not feel like a lot, but at some point they realize, holy crap, I've created an Everest of joy.
It also seems like those micro changes, right? That's like we do that anytime we want to move in a certain direction. Those little changes are more sustainable than, like we think about weight loss, or we think about improving somebody's diet. Hey, how about we switch that soda out for this, rather than say, hey, don't eat any of this anymore ever.
Right. And it's the same thing for what you change in terms of the ways you move away from the things that are draining you. The same thing can be said for intentionally creating joy. So one of the things I tell people is, create a tiny moment of connection every day. Find one thing to be curious about every day. Find one thing to be creative about every day. One thing to be courageous about. And they can be tiny. It can be as simple as, like, My moment of connection is I texted a friend. And if you do that every day, that builds up sort of I think of it as sort of like a gas tank, a joy tank, right? And so it's not just about removing the drainers, but finding these tiny moments of intentional joy. And they're not
And you know
hard.
what I love about, I love that because like my problem is that I am so passionate about so many things that I do during the day that quite literally the only thing that can give me more joy is stopping myself and allowing myself time to not create something.
Yes.
And call somebody I haven't talked to in a long time.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I told my assistant, I said, listen, let's start to dial back the Friday meetings. Right. One, I feel better mentally going into the weekend, having all the administrative stuff done. So if there's any like invoices or anything like that I got to take care of, I'll just do that on Friday. But most importantly, I actually want to call somebody, maybe two somebodies, and just talk. Like no agenda, no business, no networking, no nothing. Just, hey man, I haven't talked to you in a while. And then I'll usually be working on like 5 or 6 people at a time to try to make it so that somebody's available every Friday. And it's a little challenging. I don't always make it, but man, let me tell you, connecting with people like that has been absolutely breathtaking professionally, because inevitably, look, we're extras. What do we talk about? We talk about work. We talk about family. We talk about kids, but then we talk about work again, right? It's like it circles
and
back.
What do you do is such a big, like, that's such a loaded question when you meet somebody.
Right.
It's the standard question.
Yeah,
it is.
Right.
And guess what? Most people our age are either succeeding in their careers or they're not. And that's pretty amazing, like instantly clear. And for the people that are succeeding in their careers, like they are now networking with you and you are today, because that's what we do. And like that has been awesome personally, mentally, and super professionally. I can't tell you how. I mean, and to almost proving, well, not almost, absolutely proving your tagline. Like I didn't start that for new business development. Like I expressly did it in contrary to new business development, right? Like it was, no, this is my time to just not do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that concept I call in my book magic beans, because a lot of people in business talk about planting seeds. And the thing that's misguided about that is that if you plant a seed in your business, it's like you know what you've planted, right? I put a zucchini in the ground, and so therefore in this amount of time, I have no idea how long it takes for a zucchini to grow. I keep using this metaphor. I should look this up.
But you should just look that up.
Right.
I mean, there's
like
this thing called ChatGPT.
I feel like it says it on the back of the zucchini plant.
Seeds. It probably does.
120 days to germinate.
Yeah.
Right. But you know what you've planted. You know what's supposed to grow. You know how to tend to it. Right.
Sure.
And so that's what a lot of planting seeds in business is like. I talk about planting magic beans because magic beans, you don't know if they're going to grow.
No.
You don't know what they're going to turn into. You don't know when they're going to turn into anything. And what you're talking about, Matt, is you're planting these magic beans. And I tell people, do things that bring you joy and you will have unexpected magic.
Yeah.
Right.
You might have to kill a giant, though.
You might have to kill a giant.
But so many of my most joyful connections, friends, clients in life have come from if I show up solely for my joy and without any other agenda, something I have never expected could happen.
Yeah.
And can I ask you something else that I've noticed about this when people really lean into this? I'm wondering if you have seen this as well, but when you are really being your true authentic self and you're just in that flow state of like, I am Erin or I am Matt or I am Tom, everyone else in the room typically performs better. And I don't mean that just like as a business thing, but like as human beings.
Thing.
Right.
It's a contagious thing.
Yeah. Is that like a real thing? Like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So part of what I think is at the core definition of, I mean, joy is such a rich thing. I could define it with a whole bunch of different things, but one of the things around joy is when we are being our true authentic selves. And going back to what Tom said about presence, right? Our authentic self is a present self. We're not sitting here in our heads going, how am I supposed to show up? What mask am I putting on? Right? No. We're just there in the moment, in flow. And when we are our authentic selves, that radiates joy because there is something so beautiful for ourselves to be in alignment. And so it becomes a magnet for everybody else.
Yeah.
You can't help but be drawn to someone who is joyfully authentic.
God.
Yeah, because nobody is, right?
You're making me want to do another experiment. We've got these Muse headbands. And I would love to get into a room with like you and a bunch of people that are like actively trying to do this and see what happens collectively across brainwave changes.
Ooh,
like that would be so cool to me.
So Erin, Tom and I interviewed Ariel, who co-founded, and she basically said, if you have a cool idea, just present it. We have a very open culture. And I was like, don't actually tempt me with this, because if I have this invitation, I'm very likely
you're going to get a 40-page email at 3 a.m.
Right.
One of my best examples of that joy is watching people who don't give a shit about how they dance on a dance floor.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Right?
Yes.
They are just magnetizing, right?
Yeah,
I've been to a couple of things out here in LA where that's the whole goal, is just to like feel into your body and dance everything. And the energy of the room when everyone is feeling into their own authentic way of moving their body, and then looking at other people and experiencing the joy of others moving their body. It's absolutely ecstatic. I mean, it's called ecstatic dance, but it's a joy on another level.
I love California. I'm from California, so I can joyfully make fun of California a little bit, but I fucking love California. The shit that goes down there is awesome. I mean, come on.
Get your ass kicked here.
I fucking love it.
The hell are you doing?
Oh my God.
Fantastic though. And I mean, you can just see the energy and what people then take out of that. Back into their, like, you come home from something like that and now everybody in the room has changed.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a
now we need to fucking interview an ecstatic dance professional. That's what that is.
I can find you one of those.
Sure you can. Yeah. Oh man. There was a video a couple years back of this one dude dancing like an asshole, like in a fun way, not in a bad way, but he's like just completely fucked up. He's like it's at a concert and he's just by himself on a blanket. And within 3 or 4 minutes, there was probably 500 people around him. And it was exactly what you just said. He's like flailing around like one of those things in front of a used car dealership. It's like nothing. And all of a sudden there was like some guy next to him was like, yeah, man, I'm feeling this. Like, and he comes in and he starts doing something, and then like 3 guys and then 10 guys, and then, it just built, and some dude was on a cell phone filming it. And it was just it was the funniest thing, because like exactly what you just described happened. And I can't, and then you can, again, one of those, like, I just wasn't paying attention enough to ask the question, but I'm like, you know what, man, if I was at a concert, I had a beer or 2 in me and I saw that, I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Let's jump in. This looks fun.
Yeah. That guy's having a great time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's contagious, right?
Yeah.
And a couple years back, I was at a coaching colleague group, and we had an improv person come in, and she wanted me to write my 6-word memoir. That was one of the activities. And my first thing was I did it for my cat. I think it was 7 letters. I think I did all for my cat. And I was like, that's not that. Let me be serious. And what came to me was, I sought joy, I found me. And then I realized the reverse was true, right? I sought me, I found joy. And that's the crux of what we're talking about here, right? Is that, like,
why wasn't that the name of your book? That's awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
But so here's the thing. I've been told I wrote a general book on joy, but when you're writing a book, you have to write to a specific audience, because if you're talking to nobody, you're talking to nobody if you talk to everybody, right? And so what I really wanted to focus in on is, where are people really, really not attuned to their joy? And it's professionally.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth?
And so I wrote the book with that lens in mind, realizing that this book was secretly about just everybody finding joy.
Well, now
I did write about that moment in my book, saying, like, it's not just about showing up at a dance party and being yourself. It's about showing up at your job or in your business and finding your way of doing things, right? I wrote my entire book speech to text, because at some point I realized that my PhD brain kept showing up every time I opened Microsoft Word. That was not joyful. And then I realized that I'm great in conversation. And so my book coach said, well, why don't you just talk into Otter AI and see what happens? And that's this book right here, Joyful AF, is because
Yeah.
I talked into my phone because it was
Which
my
is
way.
so awesome because like that, you know, I'm the only one on this conversation who has not yet written a book, so I feel a little underachieved here. But I have two in motion, and I had a coach and another coach that I was like kind of thinking about doing it with, and I kind of came to the same conclusion. I'm like, you know what? I was hearing the process and hearing the formula, and it all made sense to me in my logical brain.
It was so rigid though.
Yeah.
Man.
But my like Matt Hampton brain was like, yeah, I'm not feeling any of this. So I'm going to have to press pause. I'm just like, no, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And my coaching is, I have a very specific thing, which I tell people, I'm not here to hand you a map. I'm here to help you develop yours.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
The joy is all in finding what are your ways. There's a million ways to be a leader, to be a business owner, to be a human being. What's your way?
Yeah, and Matt and I are huge N=1 people.
Yeah, we're big N=1 folks.
Yeah, and most people, they're just following this is what I've been told to do. This is how culture has told me I'm supposed to do these things. This is how business has told me I'm supposed to do these things. So my goal is to peel back the layers and figure out, okay, you have this goal. How do we find your way to get there?
So we interviewed, follow me here for 2 seconds. We interviewed a woman who does porn addiction, right?
That's awesome.
And I
don't even think we talked about porn addiction. Yeah, that was like crazy. Wasn't even the most interesting thing about her.
She'll be our first. Be our first repeat guest. She's coming on in September, I think.
We were like, we got to get her back on.
It was amazing, but she does porn addiction. And I said, my God, how does that, you can't really put testimonials on your website because like, who the fuck is being like, yeah, I jerked off like 9 times a day and she helped me through it. Like you're probably like the best kept secret ever. And here's the thing, you do joy finding for CEOs. I actually think they'd rather admit they had a porn addiction than
they were miserable.
They were miserable.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Here's my 10 mistresses.
Yeah, right.
Here's my browser history.
Yeah. So how walk me into how the fuck those people cross that transom? Like, how do they get there? Because I want to know
how much resistance that you've come into, you know, like how much pushback is there?
Yeah. Some dumb hippie like me and Tom, no problem. But like,
I'm in.
There's some resistance, but I will say I'm not walking around being like, hey, I'm selling joy, you know, side of the road.
It's like little dime bags full of it.
Right. No, I'm walking around being like, what's the biggest problem you're facing in your business? And some of these CEOs are like, we've hit a revenue ceiling. Or I feel like there's more that we could be doing. I want to be making a bigger impact, or I want the culture of my team to be better. And so I come at it from, bear with me, go do this joy audit. That's the first thing I have them do. And there's a little bit of resistance, and then they come back to me and realize, oh my God.
Yeah.
I am the cork in the bottle, right?
Yeah. This person has blown my brain matter all over the back of my office.
And there is resistance because again, it is scary, right? So what happens is if we create success through all these ways of being miserable, our brain logics, if miserable, then success. And our brain also faulty then says, if joy, then failure. And so that's why I have to take this really measured, small approach. And sometimes it doesn't even start with us focusing on, I don't always use the word joy. I say, let's get you back to the things that you do best. Let's free up your time to make better decisions, right? Let's understand where your energy and your day is going. And, you know, at some point I might say, hey, there's this word called joy. But the great thing about joy is it's got such a rich texture to it. I can use a whole lot of different language to get people to the same outcome.
But you're playing a really clever NLP game there with like avoiding the words, but you do it in a way that is almost like saving them from them, right? Like,
I want to understand what in their language are their challenges, right? And
without inundating them with preconceived bias of what, Otherwise you're just the hippie person selling joy on a cardboard sign.
And I will say, there is a gender difference. I find that in general, men have much more of an ego around, finding out that they're miserable. Whereas women often will respond to me pretty well because they'll go, of course, like I'm trying to be CEO, I'm trying to be mom, I'm trying to be wife.
Tom, you heard it here.
Also, there's just challenges
on this show. We've discovered that men have egos that are fucking.
But it's the funniest thing. They'll brag about their health issues because of the amount of stress they're under, because they're miserable.
It is a badge of honor. It is a badge of honor in certain circles.
This is my third bypass.
Yeah, I peed 8 times last night. Can you imagine? It's great. You're like, what?
It is a badge of honor, right, for men. And in general, in the sort of hustle and grind culture, it's that I got up at 4 a.m. and I'm miserable, right? Whereas for whatever reason, women are more receptive to it. And women as leaders have faced different challenges. And a lot of times it's, how do I be a strong leader and not caretake? And so much, I just had these conversations in the last couple of weeks with some people who really brilliant at what they do, and so much energy is being expended worrying about whether the people that work for them are happy.
So that you brought up gender got me thinking of a couple questions. 50,000 foot view, do you see there's being some sort of trending differences in joy patterns between men and women? I don't know, an example might be like, do you think women have like a guilt? You used nurturing before, like do women have a guilt about finding joy in being a mother? Right? Like, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've actually worked with several people over the last year who are at a crux with their career, and several of them being like, I kind of just want to be a mom. And they're very successful people working at some of the biggest tech companies in the world, have opportunity after opportunity, and trying to figure out, how do I manage this feeling of I just want to be a mom? There's the feeling of guilt around I just want to be a mom. There's feeling of guilt of I don't want my motherhood to take away from my career. And
Sure.
And I think there's probably just more awareness of joy as a concept in women, and it's probably this paradoxical thing where it's the thing they want more of and the thing they feel least deserving of.
And then for men, is it sort of,
they're less aware, but some are when I get them to it, but they feel more able to, once I kind of lay out the landscape of, it's not just about having fun, but like really aligning you to your strengths and getting you to do things your way. They can get on board with that. So they feel more ready to jump on board as a like this. Yeah, this is the thing.
Right.
Right. They don't
and I'll tell you, I wrestled for years with feeling guilty about wanting to be a father in a tech, right? Like, so this is our 25th year in business, and it's a tech, they're building websites and everything, blah, 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 forever. Yeah. But that's a very hustle and grind culture. And I cut my teeth in New York City in Silicon Alley, and it was like, the East Coast version. I knew you were at Facebook, which, by the way, before we get off, I got a quick Facebook question for you. But
yeah, of course.
The funny thing about that is that, like, it's weird to want to be a dad and to say, you know what, I could take my company to a different place if I would have prioritized that hustle and grind, which I very early on did not. And I spent a decade and a half now. My son just turned 16 2 days ago. And like, I've spent 16 years going, yeah, you know what? Like, I wanted to have like that multinational, like production company, like agency, blah, blah, blah. And then I had my son and I was like, yep, don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
But I was already kind of balls in on it, right? Like, you're like, oh, fuck, how do I about face on this? And
and it's more okay, not that it's okay in society, but it's more okay for women to say, you know what, I'm going to take a career break or I'm going to take a lesser job so I can spend more time with the kids. But people kind of look at you like you have 3 kids if you're a dude and you want to be more present at home.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
No, I 100%. And now that my kids are actually kind of needing me less, I can look back and be like, hey man, I'm young enough where I can still get whatever hustle on I want.
That you want to grind if you want to. Yeah.
If I want to grind, let's grind, but I'm not but I wouldn't trade that experience for like all the money in the world. And that still, even to this day, even literally in this sentence, I'm still kind of like, should I say this out loud?
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to help people figure out how can they be in the both and. One of my favorite clients several years ago, he wanted to work 20 hours a week so he could spend more time with his wife and young daughter. And that seemed like an impossible goal. And he now is making multiple six figures, working less than ever. He said that, you know, our coaching helped him build a better business, but really it made him a better husband. And so
wouldn't you see that spill into every area of somebody?
Every area.
You know?
Yeah. And so I just wanted to dispel this notion, right, that we have to choose. That part of what I'm here to do is say, how do we help people? I mean, it's not always possible to have it all, but like, let's move you as far towards having it all as possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I love what you do. The one of the things that struck me immediately with you and why I wanted to have you on the show so bad was that we spend a lot of time talking to people that are deep in the data of things, right? And like we did a watch party for Brian Johnson's daily routine, that, that was like, it's fucking bonkers, right?
Right.
But here's the thing. He appears to derive a lot of joy from that, right? And so as fucking crazy as that makes me, like it looks like it makes me, and he spends $2 million a year doing it, which also seems a little excessive in my opinion, but he feels really at home with it. He is absolutely feels like he's living his best life by doing that. And those are the people, though, those are the stars in the biohack kind of community that kind of take the limelight, because it's all about the silver bullet, right? Like if I do this exact thing, I take this supplement, I exercise at this hour of the day, I do whatever, I will live to 120, right? Like it's always like a prescription. And the one thing, and Tom and I've talked about the Blue Zone studies a lot on here. And it's like the thing that ranked orders of magnitude higher than all of that, sense of community and joy. Yeah. Like that's, I mean, beyond everything else.
Yep. like you can have a chain smoker that has a sense of purpose and is well connected, and they'll do better than somebody that's a, strict vegan who's miserable. Yeah.
Yep.
And like nobody talks about that. Like even those people don't talk about that, right?
Well,
like
because the thing that's so hard for our culture, right? Going back to all this data, and I'm a data person by training, right? Is that if it's not measurable, it feels too scary, too abstract, right? And joy is not measurable. I mean, you can create sort of fuzzy ways to measure it, but like, it's not the same thing as like, looking at my heart rate or tracking my sleep or, eating these macros every day. And so, it's easier for people to wrap their brain around these concrete things they can do when what they really need is a fuzzy concept. And it's one of the reasons I'm so adamant about how do we make joy concrete, right? How do we do these things like get you doing a tiny act of connection every day, right? Because that feels measurable and doable to people, and then has that overarching long-term outcome of, oh yeah, they're doing better on all the other health outcomes.
So just as somebody who espouses this all the time, like I'm curious, like how hard is it for you to sort of stay present with that same mission in your own life? Because I got to imagine, relationship, work, yada yada. I mean,
you have the same stressors that everybody else
has. I want to be very transparent and honest about this, because I think it's also when someone's espousing something like joy, I don't want people to see me on a pedestal like, this is easy for me, I've got it all figured out, because that then just makes people feel like, oh, I could never do this. Right. And the truth is, I lose my joy all the fucking time. Sure. I said earlier, I do the joy audit on myself all the time. I have to create intentional moments of joy, and I have to check myself and be like, why am I doing this thing? It's not joyful anymore. Right. It's hard. It's not insurmountable, and it's worth it to me. And so, in the world, we have to choose what are the things that we choose are hard. And for me, the orientation towards joy has been so life-changing that it is worth it to me to go through the moments of fuck, I've lost the joy again. And I don't do it from a place of shaming myself.
Sure.
I do it from a place of like, oh, okay, I've stopped paying attention. I've stopped being intentional. How do I get back there? What caused me to get there right now? And then get back on track.
Is that a gut check? Litmus test, or is that like a, you kind of just say like, hey, every couple of weeks I'm going to just check in with myself and kind of
both.
Yeah. Okay.
Both. Yeah. So I try to do a pretty regular check-in with myself. I also try to be intentional at the beginning of every week around what's coming up for me and understanding what might be draining and trying to reorient it. But
that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So like,
you're just going to give Matt like 8 hours of homework on a
well, no,
night.
I took a disc assessment like a decade ago, and he basically said, hey, look, I'll bet you hate doing invoices. And I said, I fucking hate doing invoices.
Yeah.
And he goes, here's the deal. Right. Next time you're going to do an invoice, and he knew me pretty well. He goes, look, listen, right before you do invoices, you got to do them. Just fucking sit down, meditate for 20 minutes. And just the mantra you say to yourself is, the invoices are my friend. This is going to be fine. We're going to get through it. He goes, it sounds stupid. And guess what? That was like a decade ago. I still fucking do that. And that's the only way I get through that shit. And it's perfect. And actually it doesn't bother me anymore. I do have apprehension around it, but I know I have tools to work through it. So it doesn't bother me.
And for me, we're not in April anymore, but my CPA did taxes late, and so I have taxes on my mind, and taxes is one. Or like doing my bookkeeping is not my favorite thing. And so I figure out like, what's the music that like brings me so much joy and that I only listen to during like bookkeeping time. Right. Yeah.
No.
So I'd be afraid that would ruin my favorite music.
So it could, but here's a brilliant example of what works for Matt. Works for Matt. What works for me works for me. What works for Tom works for Tom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's being intentional when I know something's coming up, and then it's checking in. And then sometimes it's sneaky, like these leaks are so small. And so I just wake up one morning, I'm like, oh my God, that thing's not joyful anymore. What happened? And then I can reorient from that.
It's tough to do that.
Yeah, it is tough. It is tough. Right. It's just become so clearly at the foundation of what makes me a well-rounded, happy, joyful human, that I am willing to be intentional about it. And I will say, sometimes it means that it's slipped for a while. Like, my God, I have been doing this thing miserably for 3 months. But the great thing is when I notice it, I can shift it.
You said 3 months. Do you know how many people have been doing it for 3 years or 3 decades?
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean,
How honest are people with themselves? Because I find that to be an issue with a lot of people. They're like, no, this is fine. You know what I'm saying? Like they're miserable, but they're not even in touch with that.
Some people aren't. And so one of the things I have to figure out when I'm coaching people is where they're at and how do I gently help them see that.
Mm-hmm.
And it might take really, again, micro changes or micro noticings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you're fine. How can we make it 1% more fine?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And you know what? That kind of stuff, that kind of thinking actually drives my wife crazy because I'm always thinking about that. I'm like, I remember one time I had to put, those forsythia bushes, those giant yellow flower things, and they grow like crazy. My brother-in-law calls me to his house. He goes, I've got like an acre of these fucking things. I need help. And I rented a shredder, and I'm like, all right, whatever. This sounds awful. So when we get there, I get to the first bush and I take down a couple things, and I'm like, all right, the flow that makes this go the fastest is this. And I failed a couple times. I tried a few things, but I found something that just made me zip through this. And my brother-in-law's on one side of the yard, and I'm on the other. And all of a sudden he looks over, he goes, fuck, you're like lapping me. What's going on? And he looks at me, and I have this like, it's not changing system. Like I do the same thing every single bush, and I am fucking flying. And he looks at me, goes, oh my God, it's just cutting bushes. How do you have a fucking formula? Have you done this before? I'm like, no, but like when something needs to be better than it is, I need something that's going to make me like not go crazy. And that is, in this case, finding a smoother way to fucking cut these monster bushes, of which you have way too many. What the fuck is wrong with you? So I'm here like, how do I get this done as fast as possible? But then it became fun. You're like, it's a game.
Because you figured out a system that brought some joy to it. Yeah.
And like and that's the thing. Then he saw me doing it, and then he figured out what the system was, and he did it, and we were finished in half the time. And he's like, "Oh my God, I wish you would have told me that in the beginning." I'm like, I didn't know that in the beginning. I couldn't have imagined doing this task without doing that task to find out how to do this task better.
Right. And I tell people all the time, we have to be in a place of figuring it out. We can't always know exactly what the joyful path is.
Right.
One of my favorite acronyms is FITFO, figure it the fuck out.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really encourage be in curiosity, be in experimentation, figure out what works for you. Maybe what works for you works for everybody, but you can't figure that out until you're in motion or you're willing to change what you're doing right now. It's not working as well as you think it is.
And that is one thing I think Gen Z does kind of miss the boat on, is that figure it the fuck out thing. That gene has been epigenetically expelled from our gene pool, I feels like, because people just, I don't think, are as attuned to that as they once were.
I feel that that's not everybody.
I'm not saying
I get what you're saying. I'm getting what you're saying there. Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there's this kind of, it's like you have that phone stuck in front of your face. I'm sure you could throw something into a search engine.
Right. No.
Yeah,
But, but that's the thing. When I was a kid and they gave me a job, like my first job, like second job, third job, like I'm a kid, I don't know anything. And like, I worked at a burger shack one time, and the milkshake machine literally had a short in it. It would electrocute you every single time you made a milkshake. And it wasn't like a huge electric shock, but I figured out real fast how to work around that. Now, can you imagine what the result of that would be? It'd be like lawsuits. The CNN would have
one rich kid.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a whole different. Now, I'm not saying my situation was right, but at the time and place, and even to this day, I'm like, all right, well, look, here's the cards that I've been dealt. They're not great. Every time I make milkshakes, I get electrocuted. That's not fun. We should, but I have to make milkshakes. So we got to figure out a path here, right? we got to do something.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I guess how often, and I guess just to finish up where you're going with your clients, you've got them through this process. Like, is there a finish line, or is there sort of a like, hey, we've come far enough? Like, I mean, how does an engagement typically wrap up with you?
Yeah. Well, so I'm oftentimes, because I said I don't sell joy, I sell the thing they want on the other side of joy. We're usually working towards a specific goal on a timeline. So I want to scale my business. I want to figure out a career path. I want to, do that. And so we're tracking towards that. And then, the joy piece is what's happening along the way. And then sometimes people will say, okay, I've got my next goal.
Right.
And so then they'll keep going with me. But yeah, I mean, the work on joy is never done. And I don't ever want my clients to feel dependent on working with me to have their joy. So it's usually more around, what are you trying to create in your business, your professional life? A lot of my clients are business owners, right?
Sure.
And then we're looking at that outcome goal. And also that helps people go, oh my gosh, reorienting towards joy did get me to where I wanted to go. And I got there faster, or I got there bigger, or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, man, we could literally put on a 8-hour seminar with you. So I do want to kind of be mindful of that. Yeah. But before we get out of here, I got to ask you something here. And I got to be honest, when I looked you up on LinkedIn, even before our first call, I was like, oh, no wonder she's searching for joy, or they're searching for joy. Quantitative user experience researcher. Tom.
Yes.
Like, Erin, this feels like the most
that's drier than saltines.
Yeah, this feels like the most. This was the job I was told I was supposed to have.
Oh my God,
that is not something you go to school going. I'm going to do that with my life.
What do you want to be when you grow up? A quantitative user experience researcher? No one never said that.
It's actually the title is dry as fuck, but it was actually really fun. I got to work with people from all over the world trying to, with data and survey stuff, figure out how to make Facebook a more connective and better experience for people.
So where I was going with that was to ask you, what the fuck is that? Like,
my team I worked on a couple different teams, but the last one I was on helped launch Facebook Stories to the world. And the whole idea of my team was to help figure out, what do people even want from a stories experience? And how do we build that for people? And at the time, the mission of Facebook was to make the world more open and connected. And so it was really about, how do we make this platform the most connective platform on the planet? And you can go talk to 7 or 8 people, and that's the qualitative side of things, but 7 or 8 people doesn't necessarily capture everybody in certain questions. And so I was designing surveys and asking people at a grander scale about what they wanted.
So that is super, super interesting. And as a creative person, I guess the immediate question I have to that is, creativity generally has a connotation of spontaneity or sort of like even maybe an accumulation, but it does seem counterintuitive to think that creativity can come out of such precise planning and sort of design. Like, is that like, am I just objectively wrong there? Like,
no, it's very creative. It's because the thing about surveys, right, is that how you ask a question can really shape how people answer it. And so you have to be very thoughtful and innovative and creative about what questions you ask, how you ask them, what order you ask them in, to make sure that my whole job was to take what I learned back to a series of engineers and designers and product people and convince them that this is what the people want. And I'm confident this is what the people want. And so experimental and survey design was one of the most creative things I've ever done.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is that a hard job? That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it was a hard job. Yeah. It was a hard job. And if I'm really honest about this journey to joy, part of what got me on the journey without me knowing I was on the journey was that I got really burnt out at Facebook. I had a big health crisis with my mom that put her in a wheelchair for life. And I was managing a team trying to get stories launched to the world. I was working myself to the bone. And my then wife turned to me and said, "You got to leave. It's killing you." And it was such a rewarding job. And I had a lot of joy, but I also had a lot of burnout and a lot of, wait, what am I going to spend all my time with my coworkers when my mom's rehabbing in a hospital for 6 months?
Right.
And so the question I was asking myself then was, what do I really want to be when I grow up? But I think underneath it was, gosh, how can I make sure I live a more joyful life? Because what happened with my mom was we don't actually know what happened to her, but she was basically almost paralyzed and now is in a wheelchair for life. And her life changed in an instant. And that suddenly got me being like, well, if life can change in an instant, how do I make sure I am living my life more joyfully, more purposefully, just more fully?
Yeah, that's another one of those things I don't think people pay attention to enough. I mean, Tom and I met in a think tank here, and one of the guys that wrote one of the books, what was it, The 10 Dying Words or something, that I can't remember the name of the book, but
there's a 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah. So that they were in or adjacent to this group, and they did all this research on it, and it was basically like the summary of that is, out of all that he could have interviewed 8 times as many people as he did, the answers didn't seem to change, right? No. Like, and it was just like, we just regret almost, chronically the same exact things, no matter who we are, socioeconomically, religious, it doesn't matter. And like, if you've ever heard one of those stories, it might be like, okay, whatever. If you've heard 2, okay, great. We've all heard like a million of those though. Like, that's not like we haven't heard that once or twice. We hear that constantly. Yeah. And like, I think that's one of the reasons why now I do get myself permission to get a little crazy. Right now I'm doing a yoga nidra exercise with somebody who's going to be on the podcast. I do daily tapping because I'm playing with something over there. And I'm like, I don't know. Well, nothing could come out of this, but like, it's all making a difference. I mean, it all changes.
And I think, this is kind of a dire thing to say, but don't wait for something cataclysmic to happen in your life to give yourself permission for joy.
Yeah.
That's pretty wise.
You know what though? How fucked up I am, Erin? As soon as I started playing with these things, I'm like, wow, you know what? I feel really good today. The next thing that came out of my brain was, oh, you must be dying. This is probably just like those last things that happen before you die. That,
again, I tell you, people have these associations with joy. Yeah. Like, nope, this is too great. I have to
no, I'm definitely dying because it's too fun. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Take away all this shit. I want to go back to when I was just like really miserable, but didn't feel like I was dying.
Miserable.
Yeah. Yep. So funny. Well, Erin, I could literally talk to you all day. Where could we find you? What do we want to tell people about you? Did I forget anything? Let's
I think the two places right now is find me on my website. So erinmbaker.com. I work a lot with entrepreneurs and executives, but I really secretly work with anyone who wants to reorient towards more joy and purpose. And if you're interested in my book, which I said it's about business joy, but it's really about joy, you can find Joyful AF on Amazon.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. And you know what? I think it's also fun too that you have your book title is actually the better title. I did like your other title, but this one was awesome.
Yep.
And I like it because, it's not like you're just coming out and say joyful as fuck, but Joyful AF, everyone knows what that means. And like, there's not a ton of books that people think of like, hey, let's just do this. Like my book is tentatively called Why You're an Asshole Client.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things. It's like, and the number one thing I get from people, muggles about mostly, you can't name your book that. What's wrong with you? I'm like, well, can't I? Like, I mean,
you can.
Like, you totally can.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. Why the hell wouldn't I just say it? Like, we're all adults here.
Yeah.
And if you are offended by that, then you're probably not going to listen to the rest of my book anyway.
So. And just an FYI, I mean, God, how many books are out there right now with Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck? Everything is fuck.
Yeah, which that one upsets me. You know why that upsets me? It's Buddhism. It's Buddhism 101 with the word fuck in it.
It is. But fuck sells right now is what I'm trying to say.
Sell.
Erin, did we tell you that Tom's PhD is in Chinese medicine?
It's a clinical doctorate. It's not a PhD. I didn't do a dissertation.
Okay.
Well, still, it's an impressive feat. And
he's all Buddhist out over here. Don't get him talking
totally
about
not a Buddhist.
Yeah.
Dalai Lama owns slaves. Fuck that guy.
Oh my God.
Fuck that guy.
Sorry.
Fucking hilarious. Well, I saw that Tom got to play with our new toy and had
I'm sorry, man. I was fucking around with it. I'm like, there's so much cool stuff we can do with it.
Yeah.
We always wanted to make sure that like when we promote people that we're doing it the best way possible. And now I can add your website to pop up on the screen.
Wow.
Fancy. It's so fancy.
Brand new. It's brand new.
Fancy.
And I'm way too ADHD not to click buttons.
I love it.
I mean, let's do it. Yeah. So cool, man. Well, listen, Erin, I thank you so much. You were amazing.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And everybody check it out and listen, have a great night. It's late.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, guys.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.